Hailing from London, she evolved into the most universally adored expat in Paris, serving as the namesake for the absolute holy grail of designer purses, raising a trio of uniquely brilliant girls, only to suffer the tragedy of burying one when she passed away unaccompanied at her French residence at 76 in July 2023. Humanity bid farewell to far more than just an entertainer. Such a vibrantly full existence demanded a heavy toll, arriving through entirely unforeseen avenues. Here is the tale of her journey. Entering the world in Marylebone, London, on December 14, 1946, this Chelsea native began her remarkable path. Her upbringing unfolded inside an incredibly unconventional household located right within the Chelsea neighborhood. The patriarch, David Leslie Birkin, served as a high-ranking naval officer, dedicating his World War II years to covert spy missions, orchestrating secret campaigns, backing the underground French fighters. Like most guys from that classic era, he kept extremely quiet about his past and almost never discussed his incredible wartime exploits. Yet his overall character, combined with that incredibly understated bravery and his dedication to causes way bigger than personal ease, deeply impacted his little girl, surfacing much later in subtle ways she probably never even realized came directly from him. Her mom, Judy Campbell, stood out as an incredibly famous theater star and highly respected entertainer during that era. Serving as the ultimate inspiration for Noel Coward, she sparked one of his biggest hits. Bursting with immense talent, she completely dominated the mid-century London artistic scene. Having a mom like that meant spending formative years totally immersed in a dazzling environment full of relentless creativity and incredible theatrical drive. She shared her youth with her brother, Andrew, a guy destined to become a highly respected filmmaker. Their close-knit family felt deeply refined and wealthy. Hanging out with brilliant minds, theater folks, and creatives was simply par for the course every single day. Because of her dad's old military ties, their home carried serious weight, instilling the belief that some global causes absolutely warranted risking it all. Meanwhile, her mom's theatrical background injected a dose of gorgeous drama, bringing that unique spark you only get from natural performers. Looking back, she always painted her early years as practically enchanting. Calling it absolutely heavenly, she claimed grown-up life never quite matched that initial pure happiness. That sort of upbringing carves out a permanent, deeply distinct mark on a person, less about being flawless and more about being intensely colorful, setting such an impossibly high bar that the future struggles to compete. Yet beneath that shiny golden exterior, delicate cracks were already forming. She considered her younger self incredibly bashful, not necessarily scared, but hesitant, much like anyone receiving countless tiny hints that their physical appearance simply does not quite fit the standard societal mold. While attending a residential academy on the Isle of Wight, classmates ruthlessly and constantly tormented her appearance. Constantly hearing she was overly skinny, sharp-featured, and totally lacking the traditional girlishness her peers possessed, left a massive scar. She opened up years down the road about the deep pain, explaining how those insults buried a deep-seated self-doubt that took forever to finally overcome, leaving her completely clueless about whether she possessed any genuine on-screen appeal. Seeking Hollywood guidance, she actually reached out to her relative, the famous filmmaker Carol Reed, for advice. His response bluntly stated that her success hinged entirely on having undeniable photogenic magic. Unable to guarantee that magic, she just rolled the dice anyway. Years down the line, she confessed to relying on nighttime sedatives beginning at just 16, a habit she basically never kicked. It remained an under-the-radar addiction spanning her entire existence, staying mostly hidden from view. Yet, that is definitely a massive clue. That secret habit highlights the massive disconnect between her public persona and the isolating reality of navigating those lonely evenings when celebrity status offers absolutely true comfort. Yet back at 16, those struggles stayed completely hidden. Instead, Onlookers simply noticed an ambitious teenager who spent her youth watching her mother magically transform local stages into the absolute center of the universe, ultimately sparking a silent determination to chase that exact same spotlight. Her rapid rise to the top happened way quicker than anybody could have guessed. Yet the specific route she took to achieve that stardom ended up altering her destiny without her total consent. Welcome to the lively 60s and her initial major blunder. Back in 1965, the 18-year-old scored a part in a stage musical known as Passion Flower Hotel. A composer named John Barry actually crafted the soundtrack for the show. Yes, that exact same legendary musician famous for creating the iconic tunes backing the James Bond cinematic universe. Extremely charismatic and wildly accomplished, the guy was significantly senior to the young woman he suddenly fell for. Unsurprisingly, her dad initially blocked the engagement, claiming she lacked maturity and citing the massive generational divide. Yet the moment she hit 18, they happily tied the knot anyway. By 1967, they welcomed a baby girl named Kate into a deeply dysfunctional union. She eventually called the relationship an absolute nightmare. The composer constantly cheated, hooking up with one of her personal pals, creating a heartbreaking rift she simply refused to forgive. This emotional damage cut way deeper. It brought that unique, crushing agony of realizing your ultimate confidant played you for an absolute fool. The partnership officially crashed by 1968, prompting his swift departure to America, stranding a 21-year-old single mother in the British capital, stuck navigating the wreckage of her completely shattered romance, along with an acting resume featuring a handful of small gigs, though she hadn't found her breakout moment yet. Back in 1966, she popped up briefly, mostly without credit, in Michelangelo Antonioni's picture Blow Up, which basically captured the entire essence of the swinging London era. During that wild 1960s cultural boom, the British capital seemed like the absolute center of the universe. She was technically part of it, but mostly just hovering in the backdrop of history. The movie's overall vibe, capturing both high fashion and deep shallowness, while exposing the empty reality behind gorgeous individuals living gorgeous lives, surprisingly mirrored exactly where she found herself at that time. Showing up without fully breaking through, simply waiting on the sidelines for a massive change, pretty much summed up her entire existence back then. Gorgeous and obviously gifted, she definitely hung out with the right crowd. Yet she felt completely lost and devastated, raising a baby who constantly served as a reminder of a fractured past that crumbled before it even took off. Casting calls in both Southern California and the UK led nowhere. She simply couldn't catch a break. Looking back, she mentioned how her dad deeply respected the underground fighters he collaborated with throughout the conflict, and that immense bravery during their bleakest times always made the nation seem like an incredible destination. So, once the opportunity for Slogan popped up, she jumped right on it. Heading overseas honestly seemed like destiny taking the wheel long before she realized what was happening, she later explained. Suddenly, a part in a foreign flick landed in her lap. Without knowing the language or having any solid excuse to relocate, she packed up anyway, holding little Kate close while bringing practically nothing else along. Driven more by sheer panic than actual career goals, that leap of faith proved to be her biggest turning point, introducing her to the city and the guy who flipped her world upside down. During 1968, the actress headed straight to the French capital to try out for the main character in Pierre Grimblat's movie Slogan. Completely unable to speak the local tongue, she bawled her eyes out during the camera read, and her raw emotion actually touched the casting team, instead of turning them away. Landing the gig meant working alongside a 40-year-old local guy known as Serge Gainsbourg. Nobody would ever describe him as a classic Hollywood heartthrob. Messy hair, a huge space between his teeth, and a legendary lack of personal maintenance defined his look. Chain smoking and hitting the bottle hard, his knack for stirring the pot transformed him into a heavily debated, wildly polarizing icon in the national entertainment scene. At the same time, he stood out as an incredibly talented musician for his era, penning breathtaking, deep tracks that sometimes pushed the envelope so far they faced censorship all over the continent. An 18-year age gap stood between them. Plus, during their initial introduction at the studio, he was completely hung up on Brigitte Bardot, whose recent decision to dump him absolutely crushed his spirit. Starting off on the wrong foot, she immediately complained to her sibling Andrew about how awful, stuck-up, and downright rude her new colleague acted toward her. Treating her like she was invisible led to a lot of secret tears, but she kept things strictly business. Eventually, the filmmaker threw a dinner party for the crew, where the notoriously dance-averse musician finally let his much younger co-star pull him out into the middle of the room. Stumbling around and crushing her feet, his clumsy hesitation revealed a vulnerable side completely opposite to his usual tough exterior. Right then and there, the entire dynamic changed completely. Realizing his ego was just a massive defense mechanism, she saw the real person underneath. That night ended with both of them hitting a local spot and partying until dawn. Later on, they crashed at his place. Opening her eyes the following day, she later confessed, it felt exactly like walking straight into an absolute fairy tale of a date. Once the cameras stopped rolling on their movie, you couldn't tear them apart. So, she decided to stick around overseas. Before heading home, the thriller La Piscine threw another gig her way, which she happily accepted. Soon after, more acting jobs rolled in, quickly followed by the singing career. The city basically locked her in. Certain towns have a funny habit of trapping folks who only planned to visit, instantly handing them exactly what they secretly needed all along. The next 12 years unfolded in a crazy way neither could have ever planned out. Over those 12 years, they gained massive international fame, built a legendary 20th-century creative duo, and eventually took a much heavier emotional toll on her than expected. The single that absolutely shocked the entire globe. Sometime in 1969, the musical duo dropped a track together that instantly sparked massive outrage like practically nothing else before it. Je t'aime, moi non plus. Which basically means, I love you, me neither. Actually started out as a secret project between the artist and his famous ex-girlfriend. Terrified of the backlash over its spicy nature, the French actress begged him to hide the tapes. He agreed, only to recut the exact same track once his new muse arrived. Filled with heavy panting and intense bedroom vibes, the audio practically put everything right out there in the open. Broadcasters immediately pulled it from the airwaves across Britain, Italy, Spain, and Sweden. Even the Pope's personal broadcasting network slammed the track, instantly setting off an absolutely massive cultural firestorm. Yet, whether in spite of the controversy or strictly fueled by it, the track became a monumental blockbuster. It skyrocketed to the very top of the British charts. Throughout Europe, the record flew off the shelves, blowing past any sales figures either of them had ever anticipated. Scandal generated buzz, and that buzz directly fueled purchases. Gainsbourg would eventually joke that the Vatican acted as their ultimate PR firm. To Jane, the smash hit represented a far trickier situation. She didn't pen the lyrics, nor did she invent the character it forced her to play. That of the panting, somewhat fragile British girl, caught in the embrace of a brilliant, demanding, older French guy. Yet that caricature clung to her so tightly that shaking it off felt impossible, defining her for decades, and for some folks, permanently. Whenever people tried to explain who she was, they immediately thought of that wide-eyed girl murmuring in French, a figure largely crafted by another artist's mind. She fully recognized she had much more to offer. However, knowing your worth and actually getting the public to acknowledge it were entirely separate battles back then. Another truth she held on to was her profound, authentic affection for the man himself. She didn't fall for the hype or the celebrity status, but rather the real guy hiding just behind the public persona. The same guy who awkwardly stepped on her feet while dancing and felt awful about it. The guy whose custom-written tracks for her showcased unbelievable sweetness at their peak. Over the following 10 years, she desperately tried to cling to that gentle soul as alcohol progressively washed him away. 12 years passed, taking a massive toll. From an outsider's perspective, the world Jane and Serge created in Paris seemed absolutely magical. Their residence sat at 5B Rue de Verneuil, located right inside the 7th arrondissement, a multi-story property Gainsbourg packed tight with a growing hoard of trinkets, fine art, and the endless clutter of a compulsive collector. Almost every evening involved hitting the town, tossing back drinks, hitting the dance floor, and mingling through a French creative scene that practically orbited their every move. The couple would stumble in right before morning classes just to get their girls out of bed. Kate, Jane's daughter from her previous marriage to John Barry, along with Charlotte, welcomed in July 1971 as Gainsbourg's own, sending both kids off to class just as dawn broke over Paris, before finally sleeping. Their existence perfectly embodied the classic bohemian ideal. It wasn't some fake aesthetic put on for show. They truly embraced the messy, gorgeous, tiring reality of it, and it sparked genuine creativity. Jane consistently booked movie roles all throughout this 1970s, carving out a pretty solid legacy in the French film industry, completely her way. Her role in Gainsbourg's 1976 movie actually bagged her a César Award nomination. She grabbed parts in Agatha Christie flicks like 1978's Death on the Nile, plus Evil Under the Sun in 1982, capturing the attention of American and British viewers who had completely missed out on her foreign releases. She also teamed up with Gainsbourg in the studio, cutting records that gradually transitioned away from the breathy mainstream tunes of their youth toward music with way deeper psychological layers. That undeniable British twang, a trait she never dropped and originally viewed as a huge drawback, morphed into her ultimate trademark and endeared her to fans. Locals over in France adored it, while filmmakers saw its practical value. Over time, she embraced it as her core identity. A British expat who actively picked a life in Paris, forever caught between two cultures, fitting perfectly into neither, yet magically claiming both. She represented far more than just his inspiration. She operated as a legitimate, highly dedicated professional, crafting a unique cinematic portfolio that stood strong despite looming under his massive fame. Yet that darkness expanded through forces entirely separate from stardom. Gainsbourg's heavy liquor habit had defined his character since day one, acting as a crucial piece of the tragic, poetic messiness constantly tied to his celebrity persona. During those first few seasons, the habit felt somewhat controllable, or at least survivable. Sure, they threw massive public tantrums, like that iconic night at the Parisian hotspot, Castell's. Out of nowhere, Jane, absolutely livid that Gainsbourg dumped out her iconic wicker basket for everyone to see, slammed a cream pie into his muck, and sprinted after him down the street. He fired back. To calm her temper, she flung herself straight into the river, totally dressed, in a high-end Yves Saint Laurent blouse, popped back up to the surface, and strolled back to their place linked together, soaking wet and giggling the whole way. Wild stunts like that formed the very fabric of their romance, fiery, explosive, and sometimes just plain ridiculous, yet profoundly connected. But as the 1970s dragged on, the alcohol abuse shifted from charmingly messy to completely unmanageable. Inside the studio, his behavior turned tyrannical. He would yell at her, and even hit her whenever her vocal takes didn't match his exact vision. That gentle soul who waltzed with her back in 1968 rapidly morphed into a dangerously volatile stranger. While the intense fire fueling their bond never truly flickered out, it inevitably spoiled, souring into a toxic dynamic that left her feeling, in her own words, treated her more like a marionette than an equal companion. A person whose worth existed solely based on what she brought to his table. By 1980, Jane hit her breaking point at 33 years of age. Having poured 12 years into their romance, she realized things were never going to improve. So she packed her bags and walked away. However, the one thing she never stops doing, which ultimately shaped both their futures, was caring deeply for him. Their romance severed, yet their bond remained unbroken, as Gainsbourg kept composing songs for her post-breakup. Following the birth of her third child, Lou, in September 1982, with her recent beau, French filmmaker Jacques Doyon, Gainsbourg mailed over some infant apparel accompanied by a note, dubbing himself Papa Two. He stood as Lou's godfather, and until he passed away, their dynamic defied easy categorization. They weren't romantic partners, beyond simple pals, and not exactly relatives, yet holding a space that wrapped up all those feelings without being boxed into just one. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Jane Birkin truly blossomed into her absolute most authentic self. She kept pursuing acting gigs, securing roles much more intriguing than any she would have landed if she'd stayed in England. She collaborated with filmmakers like Jacques Rivette, Agnes Varda, notably the acclaimed 1988 project Jane B par Agnes V, and Merchant Ivory. In 1992, she won the Victoire de la Musique trophy for Female Artist of the Year. By 1995, she headlined Euripides' The Trojan Women at London's National Theatre, while her journey with Hermès had actually kicked off back in 1983. The fateful meeting took place during a flight from London to Paris, as Jean-Louis Dumas, the head of Hermès, found himself sitting beside a woman whose overstuffed day planner and loose documents went flying as she tried shoving her purse into the overhead compartment. During the ensuing chat, she mapped out her vision for the ultimate handbag. Roomy enough for daily use, squishy enough for comfort, and chic enough to take out anywhere. Dumas took those notes and crafted it. The Birkin bag officially launched in 1984. Crafted from soft black leather and hand-sewn, featuring the effortless durability of a lifelong piece. Over the years, this purse morphed into a globally famous high-end staple, representing a very specific flavor of prestige. Beyond just pricey, but purposefully tough to score, bought via a system meant to challenge a shopper's endurance and networking skills over just their bank account. Its back orders reached mythical status. Aftermarket values skyrocketed. The Birkin label quickly stood for an elite level of ambition, completely disconnected from the actual lady behind the design. For the bulk of her later years, Jane actually felt pretty torn about the entire craze. Tying herself to immense opulence left her uneasy. Back in 2015, she openly requested Hermès drop her moniker from their Crocodile edition over worries regarding their material sourcing practices. Hermès fixed her complaints, letting their partnership proceed. Yet that move perfectly captured her essence, refusing to endorse anything she morally opposed. Simultaneously, Serge Gainsbourg was drinking his way toward an early grave. His physical well-being steadily tanked for years. Having barely survived his initial coronary during the early 1970s, he never put down the bottle. By March 2, 1991, authorities discovered him deceased inside his Rue de Verneuil residence. At 62 years of age, a massive second cardiac arrest claimed his life. Jane had actually chatted with him over the phone just 24 hours prior. At 44, her loss went way deeper than just grieving a former lover. She mourned the man who molded the most pivotal 10 years of her journey, the songwriter behind her deepest tracks, and the one soul who truly understood her right as she figured out her own identity. She continued belting out his tunes, hired symphonies to revamp his tracks, and toured them endlessly. She flat out refused to bury that chapter of her past and proudly admitted it. In her eyes, the lyrics he penned for her stood as the most genuine reflection of her soul. So singing them wasn't about clinging to yesterday, but paying tribute to a vibe that still felt alive today. Sadly, another devastating blow loomed on the horizon, one she never saw coming. Kate. Her eldest child, Kate Barry, whom she shared with John Barry, was the baby she toted to Paris in 1968, while her whole world fell apart, totally clueless about what the future might hold. Kate experienced a wildly unconventional upbringing, spending her early days guided by Jane and Serge amidst the artsy madness of their Rue de Verneuil home, brushing shoulders with France's biggest creative heavyweights, while simultaneously carrying the baggage of her parents' shattered union, staying practically cut off from her real dad until her teen years. That specific brand of youth naturally churns out incredibly complex individuals, highly emotional, widely cultured, yet unsure of their place. She turned out to be an incredible photographer. That visual intuition started young, snapping pictures of her surroundings with Gainsbourg's Polaroid when she was just a kid, an environment packed with the most captivating personalities from late 20th century France. You could find her stunning shots in British Vogue, the Sunday Times magazine, Paris Match, The Figaro, alongside plenty of top-tier magazines. She welcomed her boy, Roman, in 1987. Paris hosted her galleries, notably Point of View, Portraits, Still Life, right before she passed. Without a doubt, she carved out a profoundly successful life and a deeply respected artistic existence. Yet through those grown-up years, Kate fought fierce battles against severe depression and drug addiction, an invisible agony that completely hides its severity from the rest of the world, steadily eating away at a person's soul from the inside out. Using her personal battles as fuel, she even established a dedicated addiction recovery clinic near Paris later on in life. Basically, she wanted to channel her darkest moments into genuine support for people in need. Taking deep trauma and reshaping it into a guiding light felt incredibly recognizable. Actually, her mother Jane spent her whole professional journey doing that exact same thing. Kate Barry plunged from her fourth-story apartment in the 16th arrondissement of Paris on the night of December 11th, 2013. She was 46. First responders discovered her on the sidewalk, noting her apartment remained securely bolted from within. Investigators recovered mental health medications inside. Exactly what transpired remains clouded in public mystery, though her half-sibling, Charlotte Gainsbourg, firmly pushed back against suicide rumors, leaving the absolute reality of that tragedy tightly sealed within their inner circle. The devastating bottom line stood completely unquestioned, however. Kate Barry had passed away. At 67, Jane faced the unimaginable heartbreak of burying her firstborn, having previously mourned Gainsbourg's passing. She'd already shouldered the intense memories of their 12-year romance, only to face this nightmare. Come 2020, she dropped an album titled Oh, pardon, tu dormais, meaning, oh, sorry, were you sleeping? Every single track on that album explored pure devastation, mourning, and the sheer shock of losing loved ones way too early. Penning those lyrics took place during the bleak aftermath of Kate's passing, and laying down those vocal tracks forced her into an emotionally raw territory creatives usually dodge. A messy, entirely unfiltered heartbreak she completely refused to sugarcoat. Critics universally hailed it as an absolute masterpiece, yet it blossomed directly from her ultimate nightmare, powerfully defining her closing chapters in life. Moving forward without Kate, Jane Birkin kept hitting the stage, cutting tracks, and simply putting herself out there. 2016 saw her starring in a Swiss indie short film named La Femme et le TGV, an understated, gorgeous story featuring a senior lady tossing daily waves at a passing train, eventually becoming pen pals with the conductor. Hollywood even threw it an Oscar nod for Best Live-Action Short. Around then, Jane announced she was officially retiring from acting. Hitting 69 didn't mean hiding away. She just got super intentional about spending her remaining energy. Fast forward to 2021, Charlotte helmed the documentary diving deep into their mother-daughter dynamic, titled Jane by Charlotte. It debuted at Cannes that July, treating fans to both of them rocking the red carpet side by side. This ended up being among her final times stepping out publicly, holding immense sentimental value. Viewers watched a parent and her child hashing out long-standing emotional barriers right on screen. Charlotte often mentioned her mom felt emotionally distant. Deeply caring, sure, but frequently spaced out. Physically present, yet mentally wandering somewhere else entirely. Filming that project served as a desperate push to bridge their gap before time completely ran out. Nobody planned for it to act as a goodbye tape either. Then, a stroke hit Jane in September 2021. Doctors called it minor, and she pulled through, though the physical toll it took proved completely devastating. Afterwards, relatives practically moved in to keep a watchful eye. Nurses and loved ones rotated shifts, guaranteeing she barely spent any moments flying solo. Fast forward to 2023, she'd already spent over 2 decades silently battling leukemia. Following her 2002 diagnosis, she juggled heavy medical treatments alongside a stubborn refusal to let it become a media circus. Things took a harsh turn during the spring of 2023, forcing her to scrap a lineup of scheduled shows. Dropping a heartfelt note to her fans that May, she promised she was staying positive and just required a bit of rest before stepping back into the spotlight. She fully intended to pack out the Olympia venue in Paris. True to form, her eyes stayed locked on tomorrow's possibilities instead of dwelling on the curtains closing. Around mid-July 2023, coming off 2 solid years of round-the-clock supervision, Jane begs for a single evening entirely to herself inside her Parisian house. Respecting her boundaries, the ever-present medical staff finally gave her some space. She finally experienced that exact night she requested. When a nurse showed up at her residence early on July 16, 2023, she was discovered unresponsive. She passed away in her sleep at the age of 76. Relatives eventually announced she succumbed to natural causes, ending a 16-year battle with her health. That public announcement felt brief and understated, perfectly mirroring how Jane handled truly important matters. Shortly following the announcement, French President Emmanuel Macron praised her as a true symbol of liberty, a voice that elevated the nation's vocabulary, and an absolute cultural legend. Quite impressive for someone moving to Paris in 1968, without knowing any local vocabulary, keeping her British twang despite spending decades in her adopted nation. Furthermore, the National Culture Department labeled her an everlasting French-speaking idol. The country's cultural representative painted her as a blend of playful rebellion, cheeky grace, and a timeless symbol capturing an entire generation. While accurate, these typical homages still fell short of capturing her true essence and lasting legacy. A specific plot, the Montparnasse Cemetery in Paris, contains 2 individuals whose shared resting place defies the natural order of time. Jane Birkin's cremated remains were placed there following her memorial service at Saint-Roch on July 24, 2023. Her eldest child, Kate, was already resting in that exact spot 10 years prior. Compared to typical celebrity burial sites, it remains a surprisingly peaceful and secluded section of the grounds. Serge Gainsbourg's final resting place, where he was interred back in 1991, sits just a short walk down the path. Gainsbourg's plot remains an incredibly popular Parisian landmark, constantly covered in subway passes, smokes, blossoms, and little tokens from devoted fans. Even after passing, this trio managed to stay closely connected. She leaves behind her 2 girls, Charlotte Gainsbourg and Lou Doyon, alongside her sibling, Andrew Birkin, her sister Linda, plus a half-dozen grandkids. Charlotte maintains an incredibly successful path as a highly acclaimed performer and musician across the country, taking home the top acting prize at Cannes in 2009 while dropping albums that attract a fiercely loyal fan base. Lou likewise crafted an impressive portfolio spanning musical projects, theatrical roles, and creative visual pieces. Both girls keep her spirit alive through actions deeply intertwined with their mother's core identity. That undeniable courage, pushing past comfortable artistic limits, and eagerly producing art focused on genuinely significant, personal subjects. Production of her namesake purse never stopped. Following her passing, Hermès promised to uphold their deal, giving a cut of each sale to philanthropic causes. She originally doodled this iconic accessory onto an air sickness pouch during a flight back in the early 1980s. What started as a frustrated mom's simple fix eventually morphed into modern style's absolute priciest commodity, occasionally fetching resale values higher than the cost of an entire residential property. That initial design model, previously owned by the brand, auctioned off at Sotheby's in July 2025 for over $10 million. The ultimate functional tote transformed into an unbelievably extravagant status marker. Maintaining her deadpan British wit despite fully assimilating into Parisian culture, she previously joked about how that designer purse would inevitably dominate her final memorial notices. Her prediction hit the mark, highlighting her deep grasp on the bizarre reality of stardom, where an accidental creation easily becomes the primary defining trait the public uses to sum up your entire existence. However, her genuine legacy remains infinitely more intricate and breathtaking than any luxury leather good. Her artistic footprint includes over 70 cinematic projects alongside a solid 20-plus musical records, spanning creative partnerships from Michelangelo Antonioni in 1966 to her child, Charlotte, in 2021. This catalog was strictly hers, completely separate from her former lover's influence, detached from the couture industry's perspective, and far beyond that breathy British ingenue captured on screen back in 1968. Ultimately, her legacy proves she embraced existence with incredible vulnerability, welcoming new connections, environments, hardships, and the unique heartbreak of surviving your closest loved ones. Unlike countless celebrities who retreat from the spotlight, she never built walls to hide her personal reality. She spoke openly regarding Kate and her past with Serge. She even turned her darkest periods into a musical record, willingly sharing her pain with the masses. She let Charlotte document her on film, answering incredibly tough personal questions that remained untouched for countless years. She responded with complete honesty. Her 3 girls remain behind, all possessing unique personalities while serving as breathing testaments to their mother's core spirit. That bravery, relentless artistic passion, and commitment to showing up even during agonizing moments successfully trickled down to her children. Her legacy also encompasses passionate advocacy, championing civil liberties while actively fighting to abolish the death penalty, dedicating time to Amnesty International, pushing for disease research funding, and defending immigrant communities locally, bravely leveraging her celebrity status to highlight crucial societal issues, even if it risked damaging her own career prospects. Acting simply as eye candy never satisfied her. She fiercely rejected that role, no matter how hard society tried forcing her into that box. That same kid mocked during her academic years for appearing excessively skinny, slightly tomboyish, and just generally failing to fit expectations. She ultimately proved everybody wrong, becoming absolutely phenomenal and exceeding every expectation. She landed in the French capital back in 1968 carrying a baby, 0 language skills, and 0 future plans. That city became her sanctuary, her adopted homeland, and eventually, her eternal grave. She loved fiercely and earned that love back, though it wasn't always perfectly balanced or free of heartache, creating an incredibly authentic bond that left an indelible mark on society. That special, inviting energy she brought into any space made it feel like she never truly departed. It is an indescribable energy you simply cannot fake, yet anybody crossing paths with her instantly sensed it deep down, and that feeling never totally fades. Drop a like and hit that subscribe button if this grabbed you, ensuring you catch all our upcoming captivating tales.